a number and it's complaining. Good stuff.
Hello and welcome to the Wednesday, April 30th edition of the SIG Contributor Experience meeting. Reminder, this meeting, just like all meetings in the Kubernetes community, operates under a code of conduct, which essentially says to be respectful of your fellow speakers and attendees and generally be excellent to each other. Here at the beginning of the meeting, we like to offer an opportunity for anyone on to introduce themselves. We've got all regulars today, and it's kind of a smaller crowd because we changed the time of this meeting to be an
Here we
hour
go.
later. So, so hopefully that will work itself out over the next few meetings. This meeting happens every other week in an America-friendly time and every other week in a APAC, more APAC and EMEA-friendly time.
Nice. Let's.
Yeah, so do we want to introduce ourselves? I usually use my introduction to give an overview of what this meeting is, so I'll do that. Hello, I'm Caslin Fields. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Special Interest Group for Contributor Experience. This is one of the major groups within Kubernetes that we use to split up the work that goes into making Kubernetes the second largest open source project in the world. I really wonder about that stat, what all went into it. It's from the 2023 Project Journey report, but they don't really clarify in what way it is the second largest open source project in the world in terms of code or contributors or.
Well, see, that's the nice thing about claiming to be the second largest, right? Because if you claim to be the largest, lots of people would.
Because no one cares.
But if you claim to be like the second
Number
or
two.
third largest, nobody tries.
Yeah.
Right? They go, well, I guess Kubernetes is pretty big. That's believable. I mean, actually, weirdly, when GitHub released stats ages ago on the size of project by activity or whatever, the thing that came in number one was some Microsoft thing I'd never heard of, because apparently, like, all of Microsoft engineering had to contribute to it. So, yeah.
Hello and welcome.
Hey, Ben.
We're just getting started. We got off on a tangent. I was going to introduce what the meeting was about, and then we started talking about Kubernetes being the second largest project in the world and what that means, because it's not really clarified in the 2023 Project Journey report.
I'm guessing they mean GitHub or something. That's one of those things that's very hard to do objectively.
Yes.
Well, you can't. I mean,
like number of contributors or number of contributions or lines of code. I feel like some combination.
Right. Yeah. So, right. Speaking as one of the legacy DevStats maintainers, even number of contributors is an arguable statistic.
Or like when you get into something like lines of code, it's like, okay, but how much of our lines of code is because we vendor or something like that?
Right. Or because just nobody's cleaned it up, right?
Or as we were recently talking about, because it's all mass AI generated, and we have like mountains of code or something.
Yeah.
I'd be very curious on a report on how that's going.
Because I mean, even I've had to argue this before in terms of staffing, like even vendored code is relevant. It's still code that has to work and runs in your project and your binary, but you aren't primarily authoring it. If you look at like the kernel line of code, that's all their code, and they're directly maintaining all of it. And I think they have more than us. So, those, yeah.
I want this report very much. Who would own something like that? What SIG would that be? We should talk to those co-chairs.
Did people have topics, or are we still waiting for people, or it seems like it's pretty late?
It's we're just going. But we're kind of we're being very casual about it today. Usually the way that this meeting goes, I will actually explain this meeting now, is this is the meeting for Special Interest Group for Contributor Experience, which owns a whole bunch of areas of the project related to how contributors do their work. So we have a rough agenda here of all of the different, a lot of the different active sub-projects within SIG ContribEx, and we usually do updates on as many of them as we can get to. We usually get through everything. Usually we don't have representatives of a bunch of them. So we can do that. Also, another special item for today is I created a little report on how our social media is going year to date so far in 2025. So if folks want, I could go ahead and hop in and do that, or we can run through the sub-projects or anything else folks want to add. I'll add that to open mic discussion.
I have an open discussion topic, but
sure. We can add that. Here's the link to the notes. Feel free to just hop in there and edit it, assuming that you can. And if you can't, maybe we'll change the editing permissions on that right here.
Nice.
Looks like I can.
Good. I think I changed them all at one point to be very permissible. Don't be a bad actor and ruin our notes.
Mhm.
Well, we do at least have this under the community drive, right?
Correct, I believe.
I've got it.
Yeah, probably
Well,
worth checking.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely worth checking because that is a problem we've been having, and our options are very limited when it's not.
You're in the meeting template.
Oh. Hi, Mario.
Welcome. We're kind of doing this very casually today. So we've got a couple open mic discussion items on the agenda. One is the little social media report that I threw together this week that we can run through. And Ben has something he wants to talk about. So shall we just do open mic discussion today rather than going through individual sub-projects? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. We've got 3 ayes and 5 people on, so I think the ayes have it.
Aye.
3 ayes that I could see. Alrighty. So do we want to start with the social media report or with Ben's discussion item? Preferences?
Let's start with the social media report because
It
if
is
the discussion
contained.
item is what I think it is, it can fill all the remaining available space.
Hopefully it's
discussion
not
items
too
too.
hard.
Well, and
but I agree that the social media report was first anyhow.
Yeah. We'll also go over the social media report again in the comms meeting on Friday. So for Mario, who is in the car, you'll get to see the slides then, or you can see them anytime. I think you've already seen them. So
I'm sorry, Josh. That's also the wrong link, and that one would feel a lot. And I do not want to drag this group into. Let me correct that link.
Okay. Okay.
Dang.
I don't know what it was, but thank you for
Yes,
that.
thank you.
Thank you for not wanting to drag us into something. It's a rare, precious gem here in the open source community.
For anybody that's curious, I will drop this in the meeting chat, but because it is an interesting one. But yeah, let's do that.
Cool. So I'll run through this little social media report that I put together.
Mm-hmm.
So this was inspired by I finally convinced folks on my team that I knew things about social media and would like to tell them about how social media works. And then so I was like, what can I learn from what's going on in social media? And so I put it together into slides because that's how I learn things. And I was like, I need to present this to the community and make sure that everybody knows about what's going on in social media. So that's where this came from. And it primarily focuses on year to date. So January to, I think, April 28th is when I pulled most of the images in here. So starting off, social media at a glance. Our goal is to make sure that contributors know about relevant things happening in the Kubernetes community, and also that end users and the general public know about important announcements and the awesome work that contributors are doing. It's owned by the Contributor Com subproject of SIG ContribEx, and I am technically the social media lead. But in my personal opinion, I could be a better one. So I want to help more people get involved with social media and train new leads. I really want to start up a mentoring program that I hope to run through the summer to train up new social media leads. And I think doing these reports regularly will be something that I ask folks to do as part of that mentoring program and just generally going forward because I think it's super helpful. So reminder, we were talking about it at the beginning, Kubernetes is the second largest open source project in the world. That means that we have a very large audience. You can see at the bottom our stats from 2024 when we had around 332,000 people in our audience in terms of like followers on our social media accounts. So very large social media accounts. We use a tool called Buffer to manage multiple accounts at once, and we tend to post the same things on a lot of accounts, or at least very similar things. We'll talk more about that. We own 6 accounts currently across 4 platforms, which costs us currently $720 per year because there is a cost per account to use Buffer. It's like, yeah. And so we have 2 accounts on X, 2 on Blue Sky, 1 on LinkedIn, and 1 on Mastodon. And I'll give little overviews of the core accounts there. Also wanted to point out in the little graphic at the bottom here, you can really see the birthday content.
Yeah.
Where was the Kubernetes birthday? Oh, it's right there.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It's interesting that it's in 3 spikes. I'd love to dig into that more, but another time. So I pulled stats for this twice, and I thought it was interesting because I pulled things on Friday, and you can see the numbers there at the top for Friday. There was a little bump from a Last Week in Kubernetes development newsletter. Good work, Josh and team. And then you can see the 1.33 release ramping up last week. And then I pulled them again on what was the 28th, Monday? Yes. And you can see how much it's changed. We went from 54,000 total impressions across our accounts to 74,000, and from 2,000 total engagements to almost 4,000.
Wow.
So you can see as that release content continues to come out right after the release, the feature blog starting to come out, we continue to see a pretty big bump in our social media engagement because of that, which is super cool.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to do little overviews of some of our core accounts. First one is the Kate's contributors account on X. This was the first account that the comms team created and owned, and it was targeted specifically at an audience of Kubernetes contributors to give folks a different way to get contributor news in places where they already hang out. And we started this in July of 2018. It currently has around 4.2 thousand followers. And here's some stats about how it's doing. I would say it's growing, but it's not accelerating. We also, I didn't put in another call out. I was going to put in another call out on the clicks. It's up 81% from the previous period. So these ups and downs and the percentages you see are comparing January to April to September to December last year. Same time frame, but the previous period is what those mean. So we have fewer new followers than the previous period, but we are still gaining followers. So we're growing, but we're not really particularly accelerating. And you can see that in the graph down below here too. It's an up and to the right, but kind of a gentle slope. And this graph I also want to call out shows 12% of the total followers of the account. And the black line in the graph shows the previous period. So you can see there's a continued upward slope. We're continuing to grow. We're not super accelerating. We're not pushing these accounts to try to get a lot more followers on them or anything. But it does continue to grow pretty steadily, including in the previous time segment, which is very interesting. And you'll see that in the next account. One other thing I pulled that I thought was interesting was the most popular posts so far in 2025 by impressions. So this is reach of those posts. Number 1 was the security CVE. Love to see good reach on that. And then mentoring application for the etcd program. Then 1.33 release announcement.
Yeah, and boy, did we see the results of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
the whole mentoring program got delayed because we had so many applications to go through.
Ouch.
It was, yeah, over 300, right?
Well, it's a good problem to have, and
yeah.
does suggest that for other SIGs, we should get them to actually do a mentoring application, because it turns out that there's a lot of people who've been looking for a way in, and are interested even in an unpaid mentoring program.
Yeah, and we'll post it on the Kate's contributors account. Clearly does really well there. And I also went to the etcd meeting last week and gave a little overview of new contributor orientation for anyone who was not selected for their mentoring program. One thing I pointed out there is that we usually run mentoring cohorts to train up leaders, not to get folks from I know nothing to being a contributor, which is what folks expect when they see mentoring cohort. Something interesting to keep in mind. then the fourth top popular post was also the mentoring application, a reminder for it. And then the last one was a SIG spotlight, which is great to see.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So next one, apparently I don't have my build-ins on this slide. My slides are a little wonky. But the next account we're going to talk about is Kubernetes IO. So starting in the upper left, that's a look at this account. This is the oldest account and by far the largest account that we own. It was originally created by the CNCF in September of 2014 and was owned by them until May of last year when we took it over right before the birthday. It has around 311,000 followers currently. In terms of performance, it's relatively stable. We've got 1,193 new followers in the period so far this year, which is lower than the September to December period last year, but is still growth. Clicks, 228% up from the previous time period. I think a lot of that has to do with the CVE personally. I don't know. But Mario, hand up.
Basically, I also looked into this. We have actually a really big growth again on the account. However, there have been 2 dumps where basically people went off the platform, and that's basically what you see in the follower count. So basically, there was one dump when the election of the United States concluded, and there was another dump when the inauguration happened.
Yep. I was going to talk about that next, which you can see in the graph underneath the performance. Good to call out. It is interesting. Thank you for calling it out that it aligns with the U.S. politics.
Ugh.
So you can really see the social media landscape volatility in the graph of this one. But something else that I want to call out on this is that this graph showing that volatility is only showing 1% of the followers of this account.
Bingo.
So yes, there's a big drop at the election and there's another big drop at the inauguration. But outside of that, it has still continued with an up and to the right trend, which is very, very modest compared to the size of this account. So it's growing ever so slightly, but it's basically just static is the follower account for this account. And the top popular posts for the Kubernetes IO account, number 1 is the 1.33 release announcement. Number 2 is the security CVE. Number 3 is the Last Week in Kubernetes development newsletter from January 26th. Number 4 is the 1.33 feature blog on user namespaces. And number 5 is the feature blog on multi-container pods. And when I pulled these stats on Friday, the last one was a different Last Week in Kubernetes development newsletter. The reason that there were 2 Last Week in Kubernetes development newsletters is because we weren't posting blogs on this account.
Okay.
Right.
I'm wondering, it's like,
That's
what
my
is
bad.
it about January 26th? I was just looking at that edition to see if there was anything in it that was like particularly inflammatory, but no, nothing. It's actually a relatively short edition.
I feel like we'll see this in some graphs that I have a little bit later. I feel like there was kind of a slight bump in all of our social media at the end of January.
Okay.
For no particular obvious reason.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. So we'll move on to our next account, which is LinkedIn, which is the one I am honestly most excited to talk about. I also didn't have my build-ins on this one. Sorry about that. But this account is another one that we took over in May of 2024 in preparation for the birthday. It's an account that a community member created to make sure that nobody nefarious took the Kubernetes company page on LinkedIn. And eventually we managed to find them and take it from them. So that the community actually owns it.
Did we give them a public kudos for that?
Well, we should, but usually when this happens, it's very hard to find the person and actually get them to do anything, as we've seen on Blue
But we
Sky.
did find the person in this
case.
case.
We did in this case. So yes, absolutely we should. But this is a rare thing.
We should look back at who that was and maybe give them retroactive kudos if we haven't. This account has 11,679 followers currently, and it has an audience of whoever's on LinkedIn, end users, public contributors, whoever's out there. I feel like compared to other public-facing accounts, the LinkedIn account probably has more contributors, more of a mix. But with 11,679 people, it's going to be probably mostly end users and the public. And the cool thing about this account is it is growing like crazy. The graph that you can see at the bottom left of this slide is showing 50% of the total followers of this account. It has grown roughly 100% since September of last year. And we have a 50% increase in the number of new followers in January to April of 2025 compared to September to December 2024. So it's not only growing, it's accelerating.
Yeah. Wow.
And we have 93,000 impressions on things. This is another call out that I forgot to put in here. 93,000 impressions on posts on this account, which is higher than Kate's contributors, which is a slightly larger account. So people are looking at it. People are following it. People love our LinkedIn account. And the most popular posts on here, I think, are also very interesting. Number 1 is the CVE. Wonderful. Good to see. And again, this is by impression. So this is about reach, the number of people who see these things. 1.33 feature blog on user namespaces. The feature blog on job sets. The project blog about the Cube Scheduler Simulator project. Super cool stuff. And the 1.33 release announcement is number 5 on top popular things as I pulled them on Monday. Interesting thing about this, I think, is that technical content, I think, is especially high in LinkedIn, which is cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And moving on to our next top accounts that we want to talk about, Blue Sky. We have mirroring X, 2 accounts on Blue Sky, Kubernetes and Kubernetes contributors, well, Kate's contributors. So a end user public focused account and a contributor focused account. And Blue Sky does not yet have APIs to be able to give us beautiful graphs like we have for all of the other ones. So we can't dive quite as deep into the analysis of how these are doing. But I do want to call out that the follower account for the Kubernetes account is currently at 6.2 thousand, and we started it in November 4th of 2024. So in about 6 months, we've gained about 6,000 followers on the Kubernetes account, and on Kate's contributors, we have about 1.7 thousand followers in the same time frame. Mario.
Yeah, actually, I found a way to get statistics for Blue Sky accounts. The problem is you can't get them so you can't get historical data. I am in the process to move this account into basically the SIG ContribEx leads email, so that basically more than me can look at statistics, and they have the same analysis tools for which post got the most reach and stuff like this. So the current data that I have is from beginning of March until now. So in the future, we also have kind of statistics for Blue Sky.
And I expect at some point, hopefully the Blue Sky team will give us APIs that will allow us to do this more consistently. But yeah, for now,
seems like they're on their way.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing what you've got, Mario. I don't have any of that in here, but I did put in a few notes about Blue Sky. Like I mentioned, lacks APIs to perform the in-depth analysis that we have for the other platforms. It has clearly pretty significant and awkwardly timed growth in November, aligning with the US politics again, as folks left X and went to Blue Sky due to the moral ramifications. It was very awkwardly timed because it was right at KubeCon as well. So there was this huge dip in X and huge spike in Blue Sky right before KubeCon. which is mainly about U.S. politics, circumstantially aligned with KubeCon NA. Lots of X and Blue Sky ethical debates are happening in the community. There are, I think, some OSS projects have chosen to abandon X on ethical and moral grounds, which is understandable with open source's ties to ethics, and we want to be inclusive places for everyone and everything. But the current stance of the owners of our social media accounts is that abandoning X would impact our ability to communicate important information like CVEs to end users, which we feel is very, very important for the project. So we are currently keeping X. It has a far, far higher follower count than Blue Sky, and the rates that we're seeing with Blue Sky growth do not indicate it overtaking those numbers anytime soon, though LinkedIn is promising. So we're keeping an eye on the situation, and we welcome feedback from the community on this. One piece of feedback that we have heard from some members of the community is that non-US folks don't particularly care about the ethics of X's ties to US politics, since it is not something that applies to their country. So just a few notes about the ethics and what's going on with Blue Sky, since we don't have deep stats. And I'm going to move on to some really cool analysis. We can always come back to this if folks want to have discussion, which is understandable. Engagement analysis. So Tabby was mentioning the CVE, or I was mentioning to Tabby that the CVE did really well on our social media. And I was like, how well did it really do? So I did some analysis on engagement and the spikes that we see over the year so far. So these graphs represent January to April 28th for the K8s contributors, Kubernetes IO, and Kubernetes LinkedIn accounts. And they're split up by the reach of the post, interaction with the post, which includes like likes, replies, that kind of thing, and then clicks if there was a link in the post. So the first thing that I call out here is the etcd mentoring cohort, which you can really clearly see in the K8s contributors data. It is by far the thing with the highest call to action clicks and highest interaction as well. It doesn't have the highest reach, but it does have the highest engagement of any post on that account so far in 2025. And you can see both the original post, which has much higher interactions, and the reminder post, which has a significant amount of interactions as well. And on the other accounts, we did not post about the etcd mentoring thing. So that was only on contributor-focused channels. But we did post about LFX mentorships and about new contributor orientation in kind of a similar time frame, which you can see on the graphs. But they're nowhere near the kind of standout thing as on the contributors account. So what I learned from this is mentoring opportunities do really well on the contributor account. Folks who follow contributor account really want to know about mentoring opportunities. Makes sense. Another spike that I point out is the CVE. You can really clearly see that on every graph for every account. It got good visibility everywhere and pretty good engagement too, especially on LinkedIn and on the K8s contributors account. But weirdly, on the Kubernetes IO account, our largest account, the engagement with the CVE was much lower than other topics on that account. I think that kind of makes sense because it's just such a large audience. The number of people in that audience who actually have clusters that they need to patch or want to know deep information about the CVE is maybe a lower percentage of that audience than it is on K8s contributors or on LinkedIn, where they seem to love technical content. But interesting thing. It got really good reach on that account, but less engagement. Release info, also popular everywhere, but wasn't as popular as other content on the contributor account. Contributors know that releases are happening. They think it's cool, but they'd rather hear about mentoring opportunities. As technical content goes, the Cube Scheduler Simulator project announcement led to a significant bump on every account that you can actually kind of see in it. So I pointed those out as well. I thought that was really cool that it's a clear bump on everyone is the post for the Cube Scheduler Simulator. And one more thing I want to call out on all of this. In the bottom row, you can see that the shape of those graphs is very different from the 2X account sets of graphs. And I think that's because posts on LinkedIn have a longer shelf life. You post something on X, it's kind of a flash in the pan. People pay attention to it for that moment, and you see those very specific columns in those graphs. Like, clearly we posted something. But in LinkedIn, it's much more rolling. You can kind of see like buildups and fallbacks of specific topics, especially with the CVE. There's a huge spike when we posted about the CVE, and then it kind of trails off over time because posts on LinkedIn have longer shelf life, is my guess.
I think their algorithm does a good job of showing folks important things in general.
Mario.
Yeah, I don't know if we have, I mean, we technically have access because we have the account data. There is, in LinkedIn itself, there's also a statistics function that we probably can use that basically shows you how much interactions you have in a specific week in the on posts. And when I compare to my private account, I see impressions on posts that are 4 weeks old, so that they still get brought up in timelines of people, especially for people that don't log in like daily into LinkedIn. It can happen that you basically see a post that is, let's say you only look once a week inside LinkedIn, you basically get the posts that are potentially 1 or 2 weeks old, if the algorithm says, yeah, the post might be relevant for you.
Yeah, to that point, sorry, are you done, Mario?
Yes. Sorry, it takes two clicks to lower the hand.
Yeah, sorry, man. Yeah, that case in point, I still have a popular post that's getting impressions and comments and stuff like that that is also 3 to 4 weeks old on my personal account. So yeah, it's an interesting observation for sure.
Another thing that I want to call out on this that I didn't completely think through and put a bullet point on here for, but I probably should, is the level of difference in engagement between the accounts. Because we know Kubernetes IO is 311,000 followers versus Kubernetes contributors 14,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what, 20? Yeah, 20x difference. But we don't see a 20x difference in impressions and engagements. We see about a 5x difference in impressions and about a 2 or 3x difference in interactions, which is still significant, but ratios.
Yeah.
And impressions are higher on LinkedIn than they are on the slightly larger Kate's contributors account. And clicks per post are about twice, a bit more than twice what they are on the Kate's contributors for LinkedIn. LinkedIn is about twice what Kate's contributors is. LinkedIn, good stuff.
Yeah.
One more thing that I grabbed from Buffer. Apparently, it now has like a strategy analysis where it looks at how your posts have been doing and recommends the best day to post, best type of post, and best frequency to post. So for Kate's contributors, it recommends Sunday, which we usually avoid posting anything on weekends. So I have no idea.
Yeah. So when you showed me this yesterday, Caslin, I went and looked, right? Like the default view gives you the last, I think, week or month, which was not Sunday, but the year-to-date view was Sunday, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure how they calculate this, but I think it's good information in general. But the fact that it's like Sunday, Saturday, I don't understand why.
Yeah, because Kubernetes on LinkedIn also recommends Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
We did not expect recommendations for weekends, so I think we need to perform some experiments here.
I mean, we can add a day and one time slot to every, weekend if you want. That's pretty, I mean, aside from the fact we have 6 accounts, it should be pretty easy.
Yeah, maybe. And it also recommends posting, well, for type of post, I feel like it's pretty straightforward. If you're posting on X, post a link. Those tend to do better with impressions and, I guess, engagement. I don't know. It doesn't say specifically, but those tend to do better. That doesn't surprise me. And on LinkedIn, posts with images tend to do better, which is very interesting because we don't post a whole lot of things with images. We did actually post some in the last cycle because we had like speaker cards for the Maintainer Summit talks, which had images. So I don't know. Maybe this also pulls in data from their other accounts on Buffer, like other people's accounts, other data that they have. I don't know. But also recommends frequency. For Kate's contributors, it recommends once a day, which is a relatively low frequency, which makes sense for that account, I think. But it recommends 3 posts a day for Kubernetes IO and LinkedIn, which is definitely not something that we prioritize or particularly do. Oh, and the best day for Kubernetes IO it recommends is Tuesday, which actually makes sense to me.
Yeah, that does.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other 2 don't. But it's worth experimenting with.
And last thing I have is a few takeaways. You want to throw something in before the takeaways?
No. I wanted to make sure we got to Ben's thing.
Yeah. Last slide. A few takeaways. I did have this building in, but apparently not on this slide deck. So a few things that I want to call out in terms of social platforms. Maybe don't sleep on LinkedIn. It's actually quite impressive. Huge audience growth for us. Posts seem to have a longer shelf life, which is really cool and we should think about. On Blue Sky, it grew really fast in late 2024, aligned with US politics, but X still owns by far the largest global technical audience, but it's not really growing, is also one thing I should call out in this statement. And Blue Sky, I feel like the growth has been very spiky. We don't have the graphs to prove it, but from what I've noticed from just looking at it, it seems to be very spiky rather than consistent growth or accelerating growth. And in terms of content, topic matters more than how you say it. One thing to point out is that of the 15 top posts that I showed from the 3 different accounts here, 4 of those were handwritten. All of the others were auto posts.
Wow. Okay.
So posts about our blogs and posts about LWKD and things like that do really well. Account audience matters. We saw that mentoring does really well on the contributor accounts, and the CVEs get very few clicks on our largest account, but technical content does amazing on LinkedIn. Very interesting. Something that I noticed and am definitely not salty about is that we do a ton of social media around KubeCon, and that didn't show up anywhere in any of these statistics in a noticeable way.
I do think that potentially well, we do need to broadcast specifically contributor activities around KubeCon, but
yeah,
maybe we should narrowly scope it and not do a lot of repeats, because if it's not getting traffic, then because like I think one of the things that's happening there is that the CNCF itself puts out a whole ton of social media about KubeCon, and we get kind of swamped by that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot going on around that. And it is important also, just like it's a checkbox. Like you'd expect that from us, I think. So it's important that we do it, and it keeps folks engaged if we're posting more regularly. It's something kind of new that happens every now and then. So I think there's value to it, but we should think about like, are there things that we can cover that would be more interesting to folks or something, because it doesn't get a lot.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, I want to set up a mentoring cohort to hopefully run through the summer. I started drafting out some requirements for that.
Yeah. One thing I'd want to work with you on for that mentoring cohort, because I have the same issue mentoring people for LWKD, which is specifically looking at how do we train people to write briefly and to the point, because that is not something people are learning in school.
No.
And you know, I've been through this with a bunch of individual contributors to LWKD, and I kind of feel like it could be its own segment, because obviously you need that for social media as well.
Yeah. And how do you recognize what's actually important to people as part of that? especially important in social media. And I think doing reports like this could be a step in the right direction to getting that more consistent with folks who want to help out with these things. So I want to do these regularly, at least like quarterly reports, I think would be really helpful for the community. And that's what I've got. So we could use the last 12 minutes to discuss Ben's thing.
Okay, so I'm not sure exactly how to jump in, but basically, I think the background is I've noticed a number of places in the project where we need to recruit maintainers, but we kind of have our issues very bimodal right now, where there's either the good first issue that can be sniped by a totally new contributor just popping by curious about the project. They maybe send us a PR and then that's typically it. And then we have other issues that are, okay, you're going to have to like write a KEP and drive consensus on how do we even do this thing. We haven't even come to an agreement on how this should happen. And those are a kind of a brick wall, even for someone that has gained some expertise and is willing to spend a fair bit of time, because they don't have the relationships yet. And asking them to create consensus is a really huge ask. So there's this middle class of issue that's, you don't have to drive consensus, but also we're not going to spell out every detail for two reasons. One, because it's expensive, and two, because when we do that, they get snapped up really quick. So like, and I see this, if I write out a really detailed, here's exactly how to do this thing, then they'll get patched like same day. And then I don't have any backlog for someone that shows up and says, hey, I really want to get involved. I'm like, well, I have things where we don't know what to do, and you're going to have to get consensus on them first, or I have these 20 issues that were solved by like 20 different people that are already closed. Help Wanted almost describes this. It has some really good points like Goldilocks priority, that it's not something that we think is useless that we're going to basically ignore, but we some reason have an issue for. And it's also not something that's a P0 bug that we're going to jump on right away and you're not going to get a chance to work out your PR because like we have to patch this. But it also says it has to be a low barrier to entry, easy for new contributors, with documentation on how that type of change should be made should already exist, which is like a very slight difference from the description of no barrier to entry for good first issue. I think this particular distinction means that we basically never file things that aren't just good first issue or don't have either of these labels. I have a number of projects where it would be really useful to have a clear shared backlog of, you don't have to drive consensus. It's in that Goldilocks priority, but you might actually have to go figure out how to implement it. You might have to read the code. You might have to learn some things, and we can help you, but we don't necessarily have a guide. In some places, we basically can't. If you look at a project like Prow or Structured Merge Diff, almost all of the maintainers are gone. The few people that are hanging on don't even know everything themselves. So if they have to write that up first, then we have problems. But we do have people that will come by and are willing to work on things. Being able to point them to this middle ground of, you don't have to drive consensus and it's Goldilocks priority without, we have to have really good docs for this, is I think a lot more useful than how Help Wanted is currently written. And just really that first bullet.
I mean, I agree with that. That's how Help Wanted is used in other projects, right? So like for KubeVirt, for example, if we post something that's a Help Wanted, then that means this issue might be easy, this issue might be super complicated. What we're identifying about the issue is the person to work on this is not currently in the project. Whereas if we're going to have the full write-up of, hey, here's all the things you need to know to work on this, that gets listed as good first issue, or ContribFest if there's a ContribFest coming up. Treating Help Wanted as synonymous with good first issue dates back to basically when good first issue didn't exist. And I think we should change it.
That makes sense to me. In fact, I would actually add that I think in some places we're currently using it that way, but then like the bot comments and the links and stuff don't gel with it. And then when I've like talked to other people about it, there's been confusion about if that's acceptable. And I've also wound up, because I'm not sure and I don't want to be setting a bad example, and in some other places I've wound up saying like, well, I guess I just have to keep a separate backlog. And I know a couple other maintainers that are doing something similar. The problem with that is it's way harder to track and it's not collaborative. I really think that we want to be able to do that publicly, that middle ground issue. And there are a bunch of projects that if we agree to this, I will go push on. We need to start tagging those because they're in this trap of we barely have maintainer bandwidth and we have to bootstrap them out. So good first issue isn't super helpful because we don't need people to fix a bug here and there. Like we can always tackle the few of those that are urgent, but what we really need is to grow people that are going to work on something really non-trivial. And some of these projects there just isn't. Like structured merge diff is a GA API in the Kubernetes API server that has major performance considerations and is some very tricky code. So it just doesn't really lend itself to we're going to write up exactly how to do this patch, but it does really badly need somebody else to learn how it works and take it over. The one maintainer we have left only kind of knows how it works themselves. And so like telling them they have to write up good first issue is like, that's not going to happen, but they could look at some issues and say, okay, this is a reasonable approach. Like we think that this is fine amongst the API machinery leads to make this change. But the person that comes and works on it is actually going to have to figure out a lot themselves, and they might get some help, but we're definitely not going to have a how to contribute guide for those issues.
Yeah.
Mario.
I mean, one idea that jumps to my mind is when we do the new contributor orientation thing, we have like the specialized, like you need to bring something of experience to work on those stuff. And basically it would be helpful if we can get a consistent tagging and just basically create a board where automatically all of those are pulled in, so that we can basically point to these are specific issues that take some knowledge and a lot of work to get into this. And then we can basically also advertise on those topics, but do the advertisement in a way that it's like, expect this not to be a trivial thing. And maybe it would be interesting to say if we have, for example, API machinery has some of the issues and they need to be fixed, that we have a dedicated, not a mentor, but oh fuck, I'm really stuck and need someone to ping to just that maybe can point me in, ask this person, or look at, or maybe you need to dig to this part of the code, so that it's basically that they are not left alone. Because I think that is the main problem, is that people are afraid to be left alone. And also what we already do is we encourage people to join the meetings. And I think this is the way, or this might be a way forward, let's put it this way.
Yeah, one element that comes to mind on all of this is that in new contributor orientation, we very specifically don't call out good first issues as a good way to get started. We have a section at the end where we talk about how good first issues are not a good way to get started and a good way to get yourself trapped, because the vast majority of good first issues that people pick up tend not to get finished, which means that they have to be re-triaged, which is more work for the folks who could be mentoring other people or creating good first issues. So we call out that issue and we encourage people to get involved in meetings or other ways instead.
Yeah. For the sub projects where we don't have, a group of dedicated mentors, the getting stuck problem was why we originally had the one-on-one hour. That's been in suspension for quite a while, over tooling, actually, believe it or not, because there hasn't been, we were using a calendaring tool for it that stopped existing and have not ever found a replacement.
Oh, rough.
And it's not, there's an age-old issue open about that. If that's really what's holding people up, then maybe we should reprioritize that, because like in the case of, for things like Prout, right, because for sub projects like etcd, right, we can have a mentorship cohort, right? For other stuff like Kind, the de facto maintainers don't have enough time to run a mentorship cohort,
right?
But the one-on-one hour would be conceivable. And and who knows? It's been 40 years. There might be new tools out there.
I would actually say the opposite. I think Kind we're doing okay. Prow is where we really just one example. Like we have just like no bandwidth from anyone that knows it. Currently. So I think I can reasonably ask the people who know it currently to help me confirm if some of these issues are agreed upon reasonable. They fit in that Goldilocks priority, and they will at least find some time to review and approve them. But they need to be a little bit more involved tasks so we can start to say, yeah, this person is going to become an owner. But they also cannot be like controversial, because we don't have much bandwidth to drive consensus on non-essential features. But if we have a few where we've already figured it out, which I believe we do, we can tag it. So it sounds like we mostly agree. I will plan to send a PR to tweak this then. I also noticed we don't have the links here for the searches to find these issues, and the Go link that we have doesn't work. So I'll try to take a stab at that. Go.caseo/good first issue is actually currently linking to what is now an invalid GitHub query that doesn't work.
Oh no.
I think a correct query looks like this. I couldn't get it to work with all 4 of the orgs at once. Kubernetes Client and Kubernetes CSI are almost their own thing anyhow, so I think it might be more pragmatic to get a working query that at least has Kubernetes and Kubernetes SIGs than a broken query that tries to add those other orgs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good points.
And we should also, if we don't have one already, we should add one for help wanted. And I think my follow-up would be this doc that says like the definitions would be a really good place to link to those searches, and it doesn't look like we do currently. So I'll
by the way,
to send some PRs for that.
As you're aware, all good first issue and help wanted also get slurped into CloTributor.
CloTributor?
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
CLO monitor, or is there another tool?
CloTributor.
Okay.
I don't know that one.
I don't either.
I have seen that GitHub is like aware of these labels.
CloTributor.
Yeah.
Not LFX.
Oh boy.
All right.
Share this one out.
I have another meeting to get to, but
sorry, Kathleen.
Good work today, team.
Thanks all. I'll try to get those PRs shortly.
Sounds good. Thank you all for joining.
Merge my PR, Kathleen.
Oh, yes. Good call. Yeah, I should do that.
I'll DM you the direct link.
Okay, that will be perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
See y'all.
See ya.